Hey guys, what's up? This is Stock Retail coming back to you again. As you can see, today I want to talk a little bit about the APE and AMC conversion vote again, and in particular, well, actually, let me back up. What I want to talk more than the conversion vote itself is the idea of how sometimes there are concerted efforts to shape the way that we think, us apes. And, I've mentioned a few times that I've actually been around here in this movement, more than 2 years now. A couple of people have kind of said on YouTube, like, wait a minute, what do you mean you've been here 2 years? I only see your videos going back a couple months. Um, well, hopefully you also see in my bio, you can check me out on Twitter and you can see all the receipts you want going back those 2 years. And you'll see one of the things about me in particular is you would find tweets pretty regularly encouraging apes to go back to logic, go back to reason, use data, use DD and facts. And what I find with logic and reason in particular is when someone is making an argument, sometimes what happens on social media is people are like, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And they just click and like and retweet and whatever. But then you pause and you kind of think it through and you go, wait a minute. This argument kind of breaks down pretty quickly if I sort of poke at it. And so that's what I want to do today. By being around 2 years, the other thing that I've seen is sometimes there is a sort of attempt to shape our sentiment and shape the ways that we think. And the way that looks is all of a sudden, all these accounts will show up on a bunch of threads for me or other apes that I see. And it'll be these accounts you've never heard of, you've never seen, they've never interacted with anybody. Um, and they all seem to be reading from the same script, too. It's like they all got released at the same time to go forth and spread what they view as the good news and what we might view as the bad news. Look up something called sock puppet accounts. That's been a big thing. There's some apes I know who tend to do a pretty good job spotting those. Whether sock puppets, whether page shills, whether bots, just the whole point is there's often attempts to shape our thinking. And why that matters today is I'm seeing a few particular arguments that are being repeated so frequently and with such copy paste by so many accounts that I've never heard of that it's pretty clear to me that those are sort of sentiment shaping. So before we kind of get into that, I want to talk about mental framing. And the idea here is if you want to accomplish something, if you want to shape someone's thinking, you kind of get them focused on talking about a subject on your terms. And that's what I see happen to us sometimes. And I'm going to talk about what those terms are for Shorty in a minute. Um, Before I do that, I want to also just highlight the arguments that I'm going to talk about uh, if you are a genuine ape. I know apes who disagree with me on the vote, and these are apes that I'm going to keep rolling with. It's okay for us to disagree. This is a movement, in my opinion. It's about far more than any one decision together. This is about us stopping, powerfully corrupt forces. And, whether we agree on one vote or not, we can still be apes together. So if that's you, I'm not directing this at you, but I am going to talk about, yeah, how I'm seeing, bots and sock puppet accounts kind of show up. So just keep that in the back of your mind that if you see any arguments here that you as a genuine ape, support, then I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to people who are sort of reading from a script and using these arguments and why I think they're sort of pretty weak arguments. But let's talk about mental framing first. So let's say think about like you are a dad with kids. I've got 3 kids myself, a dad or a mom or a babysitter or something. So I've got 3 kids myself. When they were younger, they're obviously much more impressionable. Now they're all a little bit older with minds of their own, and that's great. I wanted to raise, independent young thinkers. Um, there's days that's a little tougher as a parent, but ultimately that's the right thing to do, right? I want them to think for themselves. But when they're younger, they're a little more impressionable. And let's say, I'll just make up a scenario. Maybe it's been rainy or the family's been sick and we've been kind of trapped in the house for days. And maybe I, as a loving dad, I'm like, hey, you know what? I want to get my family outside. We need some vitamin D from the sun. We're going to go to the park and we're going to play. And then let's say, like I don't know, a 4-year-old is kind of like, oh no, dad, I wanted to go to the ice cream store. I really want ice cream. And I'm sitting here go, okay, how do I shape them and influence them? Those are those words we've talked about in a couple videos actually. Um, go look at my video on tigers and frogs if you want to hear how I think about some of the influencers and what they've been used for in the ape movement. Um, but if you want to influence a young child's thinking, then it's about how you phrase things, how you word things, how you come across. So just check this example. Maybe I talk to them and I say, "Oh, man, that ice cream is really cold on your teeth, and ooh, we're gonna go to that kind of slippery floor of the ice cream store. It's kind of dark in there. Are you sure you really want to go get cold ice cream? Or wouldn't you rather go? It's a shiny, sunny day. We can go play in the park. We can run around. I'll play games with you and I'll bring cookies. Wouldn't that be fun?" And so you hear what I've just done is in the choice that I don't want them to pick, I'm highlighting only negative things. I'm not talking about how amazing ice cream tastes. I'm not talking about how hot fudge is one of my favorite things in the world. I'm not talking about how the sprinkles are so cool with all their colors and they can get all kinds of toppings, how great it smells when you walk in there. I'm avoiding all of that. Even though those things are still out there, I'm shaping that young child's thinking by highlighting, and frankly, highlighting things that aren't really negative. Like, who really hates ice cream? I don't know, maybe you do, and so you're laughing at me, but generally, people wouldn't talk negatively about an ice cream shop. But you see how I'm sort of molding the thinking of that child, and then I'm painting this wonderful rosy view of the playground and the park and all that, and how amazing it's going to be, and then kind of softening the blow on the treats by saying I'm going to bring cookies. Just a very silly example on how we get framed, but what I want you to do is, as I go through some of these next arguments, I want you to just think through, have you been seeing, like I said, those sort of stranger danger accounts that you've never heard of? And let me clarify too. New apes come along, there are millions of us. This should be a welcoming movement. I am so excited when new apes come along. And just because I don't know you, that doesn't mean a thing. Like, honestly, people drop comments, DMs, whatever. Um, I'm glad when we pick up new teammates, okay? We're all in this to stop corruption. That's the main thing. That's the bottom line. But again, when I see more of this concerted, they're all showing up at the same time on all these different feeds and threads, and they're all reading from the same script. Okay, we're getting framed. Someone's trying to get us to think a certain way and shape sentiment. And so, what are the arguments that I'm seeing? Well, the first is, hey, we can't do the reverse split because they're just going to short it more. Or they'll never stop shorting. Okay, so first off, to that I say, I've demonstrated in both of the other vote videos that I've done, one before the holidays, one just yesterday, that frankly a yes vote actually means the least dilution and the most access to capital for AMC. I'm going to talk through in a minute what are the top ways to beat shorts, but spoiler alert, access to capital definitely spooks the shorts and causes a real problem for them. So if you're saying you want to stop shorts, but then you're saying, in order to stop shorts, I want AMC to have less capital. I hope you can see the contradiction in that argument. And that's actually the point. That's why I'm saying go back to logic. You can see actually there's a contradiction in your argument. You're saying they'll short it more even though it's going to be stronger. And they'll maybe short it less now even though it's not as strong in terms of a capital structure. Yeah, okay, that argument doesn't really hold water for me. And a no vote doesn't solve that because I've just said, and again, I've shown this, I've demonstrated, today this might sound a little more subjective. Some of it is, but I'm also not, sourcing it as much in this video. But go back to my video on the vote and you can see that actually a no vote means more dilution and less access to capital. Adam would have less total ability to generate cash in it with a no vote. And so the idea that shorts could short it less, and I mean, have you seen us lately? Like, go look at the percent of shorts on the intraday, just over the last month. Just look at all the days. There's a website called Chart Exchange. I know you can see that at. If you have Fintel access, you can kind of see that there. There's a few places you could go check that. Pretty sure they've been actively shorting us, and that hasn't stopped. So no, that argument to me, that's not something that solves them shorting us. It's just someone saying, I don't like the reverse split. Okay, there's another argument that's closely related, which is we lose 90% of our shares. I did one video, kind of a funny one about, hey, do we really lose 90% of our shares? Where I kind of tried to demonstrate that visually. Totally different take. did that with some red and green colored water. Check that out if you want. Again, I want to be clear. Hey, there's good apes who might disagree with me on this. That's fine. But what I want to highlight here that's the problem with this argument if you take it to its extreme, and any argument is a problem if you take it to its extreme, this gets you focused on quantity. Now that's that mental framing. I want you thinking about how many shares you have. I'm not really having a conversation with you on the value of those shares, the value of your total portfolio. You know, like for example, if I came to you and I said, hey, which would you rather have? A million shares at a penny or 2 shares at $1 million each? Well, a million shares at a penny, you know, what is that, like 100,000, maybe that's $10,000. I got to do the quick mental math here, but you guys get the idea that it's certainly less than having 2 shares at $1 million each, which would be $2 million. So if I get you focused on quantity, how many shares do you have, and I get you focused away from the actual value of your portfolio, I can start to shape your thinking a little bit. And so there's 2 examples I want to talk through with that. The first is, and now let's go back to framing too, because I wanted to make that point. Look at how I kind of even framed you right from the beginning. I kind of had you looking at this penny and this quarter. Maybe I subtly planted the idea in your head. And so here's where I want you to question me. Like, you know, I don't want you to fall for any influencer. And here I am talking on YouTube. My intent is to never be a so-called influencer, but I'm sharing with you my way of thinking. I'm sharing it with you on YouTube. I suppose that's influence, right? So you need to think through what I'm about to say and whether it makes sense to you. And even, okay, think for yourself. Well, what are the counter arguments to that? And this is how you come back to that logic. You come back to that reason. Is retail telling me something that makes sense? If I wanted to argue against this, how would I do that? And yeah, I'm not going to love everybody pushing back on me, but you know what? It makes us all sharper. If you push back on ideas, and then if the idea is strong, it's going to stand up. It's going to stand up for itself. But it's okay to poke and push at an idea. You're not poking and pushing at me personally. That's often when I know, hey, this is Shorty coming at me. Or at least a pretty grumpy ape. But poke and push at ideas, okay? So I'm going to tell you an idea of how I think about the quantity argument and why I think it's a bad idea and why it can get you into making bad decisions. But now you got to think about, do you even agree with me? So the first way I look at that, you know, I mentioned kind of shaping a young child's thinking. My oldest is about 8 years older than my youngest. And so let's say that my oldest maybe hadn't been the nicest. And by the way, he is. He's such a wonderful big brother. I'm just so proud of him. But let's just say when he was, I don't know, 12 and the youngest was 4. And let's say the youngest had a quarter in his hand. And so my oldest could walk up to him and say, hey, buddy, man, you've got that old kind of worn down quarter. Looks like it even has a little bit of dirt on it. You just have one of those, but I have these 5 shiny pennies. Wouldn't you rather have my 5 shiny pennies for your one old beaten up quarter? Okay, so you hear how a quantity argument does not consider value. The value of that quarter is far greater than the 5 pennies, but the quantity argument shaped the young one into a bad decision. If he makes that trade, that's a bad trade. It's a 5-for-1 trade, but the quarter is worth more than the 5 pennies. And so go back to the other video I made and why I think a yes vote ends up making our shares worth more. It has to do with less dilution, better access to capital. Sound leaders are going to create value in a company that has access to capital. So you can see why I'm making that argument, but I hope at least you can see if you went straight up on a quantity argument, you lead yourself to fairly bad decisions. The other one that just illustrates that point pretty clearly, if I came to you and I said, you can have 1 million Shiba coin, okay, or you can have 1 Berkshire Hathaway share. You know, I looked and today Berkshire Hathaway closed at $473,000. It's actually like 472,999 point something. But let's call that $473,000 for 1 share of Berk. If you had 1 million shares of Shiba coin, and let's say tomorrow Berkshire went up by 1%, and so you would gain $4,730, just a 1% gain. But say Shiba coin, you're like, okay, well, how much? You gave me 1 million Shiba coin, and what does it have to go up by tomorrow for me to gain that same $4,730? Guys, that Shiba coin would have to go up by 400%, even though you have 1 million of them. It would have to go up by 400% tomorrow for you to gain that $4,730. Just go out and check the price. I mean, that's based on the time of when I was going to record this video, so could be off by a little bit, but you get the basic idea. With Berk A, if you had one share, it just has to go up by 1% for almost $5,000 gain. With Shiba Coin, if you had 1 million of them, tomorrow it has to go up by 400% for that same gain. So if I get you focused on quantity and I don't have you thinking about value, I can shape your thinking. We're going to talk a little bit more about that from another angle in a minute. And the other thing, a no vote doesn't solve this. It doesn't solve either of these, because in the first, that first row there, if you vote no, I've mentioned in the other video and kind of demonstrated that one with like real DD, provable math, all that. Sourced too. Someone on YouTube tried to comment and say, "Oh, this is all subjective," and I was like, "Did you even watch the video? It's like literally sourced straight from their filings." So if you're shorty listening to this, try a different argument. In this case, though, so just kind of tying back to that, because a no vote means actually more dilution and lower access to capital. So that's that first row. And in the second case, a no vote doesn't impact the value of like a percent gain. So we're going to talk about that a little more in a minute. I don't personally think that a no vote actually solves the issue here. Similar topic here, but again, I'm just hitting what I see sort of those sock puppet accounts doing. I want to kind of call each of those into attention, or put a spotlight on them. The other reason, too, I mentioned that you can see it's a concerted effort. They all use the exact same language. Go out and just find out how many times have you seen this $5,000, $500 versus $5,000 thing over and over and over by a ton of accounts I've never seen in my life, and they all use the exact same numbers. That should kind of tip you off. So they'll say, well, right now, if my shares ran to $500, I have blah, blah gain. Whatever, like if I have 1,000 shares, it runs to $500, here's my gain. But that means after a reverse split, it's got to run to $5,000. And there's no way it's going to 5,000. Or they'll say, sometimes they'll pick some other number, but I see the 500 and the 5,000 really often. But here's the problem with that. From today to $500 would be 1,000% gain. I'm rounding a little bit here basically, and from if we did a reverse split and you're basically at $50, from that to $5,000 is 1,000% gain. They are both the exact same gain. 1,000% equals 1,000% the last time I checked. And the change on AMC's market cap, the change on the overall value of the shorts, the change on the overall value of the longs is literally the exact same. If you run from 5 to 500 or you run from 50 to 5,000, there is no difference. If you ever took like those SAT tests where it says, blank is to blank as blank is to blank. That's the point. You're like thinking about ratios, for example. So in this case, 5 is to 500 as 50 is to 5,000. There is no difference in the relationship between those things. It's math. Like there's literally no difference between those things in terms of a percent gain, a value change, the market cap impact to AMC, the impact to the shorts, the impact to the longs. It's the same. I know there are good apes out there who don't believe me on that, but I'm sorry, it's straight up math. It is not different. This is, like I said, the case where if Berk gains whatever percent and Sheep gains whatever percent, this stuff matters because I used to sometimes think about this with my own stocks, and I'd think about, if I had this many shares and they gain 10 cents or they gain $1, here's how much money I have. But I would far rather have less shares in a company that gains a higher percent than have a lot of shares in a company that doesn't gain much of a percent. Because start thinking about your portfolio. Think about portfolio management. At the end of the year, wouldn't you love, I'll make this up, wouldn't you love to have 100% gain instead of a 10% gain? You need to start thinking, I really believe this, and it's okay if you disagree, but I really believe you want to start thinking about your overall portfolio and what types of percent gainers you're going to have, and risk management. Like once MOAS is done, like right now I'm all in, and I don't recommend that. I really don't. I don't recommend being in one stock. No one in their right mind would ever recommend that, but I am. And when we finish this job, whatever this is, whether it's MOAS, whether it's just a squeeze, whether it's even just AMC recovering and this is a massive recovery play, of course I'm hoping for the squeeze, as are you. But when this is done, you'll hear me start shifting my language to thinking about risk management, portfolio diversification, and one of the things you'd be doing there is thinking about, which stocks do I have that are more like a growth stock? And there you're thinking about percent gain. So just if I wrote it out in like a formula term, like X equals X, X does not equal 0.1X, okay? So in this case also, no vote, in my opinion, really does not solve it. You hear me say the word opinion there. Some apes are trying to make the argument that actually this does matter. I think that you need to think in terms of percents, and 1,000% equals 1,000%. Kind of covered that one into the ground, so I won't keep going. The last one that just is the most obvious, to knock down. Actually, I don't think this is the last one. I think I got one more. But one of the ones that's the most obvious to knock down is, and I got hit with this a couple times today. Well, Adam, said checkmate and ape didn't work, and look at how it's been driven into the ground. So because that didn't work, I'm a no vote on this conversion because I don't trust that that's going to work either. But you think through the opposite. Always flip an argument, kind of think about the inverse or sort of flipped upside down. In this case, someone's telling you, ape didn't work, so I want to keep ape. I'm pausing to let that sink in. Think about that. Someone coming to you saying, ape didn't work, it sucked, we got hammered, Shorty hit it, Millennium, that's connected to the mob, yeah, check my video on that one, got involved, so, man, I'm out, I'm a no vote. Okay, but what's the consequence of a no vote? You still have ape. So if your argument is, I don't want to vote yes because ape didn't work, but actually I'm going to keep my ape because ape didn't work, I hope you can see how that's just it's something called circular logic. It just doesn't. Actually, it's not technically the definition of circular logic, but the point is that argument doesn't work. You're saying this thing is bad, so therefore I want to keep this thing. That doesn't make any sense to me. So a no vote definitely doesn't solve that because a no vote really is saying I want to keep the thing that I'm saying I don't like. That doesn't make sense at all to me. Okay, the last thing I mentioned, and this I'm going to go through a lot faster because it's proven on the other videos, but people saying, I don't want to give Adam shares, I don't want this dilution, but actually, in this case, a yes vote means less dilution. You don't even have to believe me. Go check it out. I walk through both the logic and actually their sourcing why that is, but in particular, it's just access to capital. Do you want Adam selling ape at 67 cents? And I proved in the other video he has another 4 billion of those if he wants to go get those. Those already exist. Those of you saying I'm voting no because I don't want him to have shares. He has shares today. He can go get another 4 billion ape if he really wanted it. And what do you think that's going to do if he's having to sell ape for access to capital? He's been really clear. He's not letting this company go bankrupt. So that's not happening on his watch as far as he's concerned. So a no vote in this case says, Adam, you're just going to have to keep selling ape for your access to cash until obviously the industry improves. And if you watch other videos, you know how bullish I am on the industry itself and that AMC is returning to profitability, but there's going to be a need for access to some capital. So no, a no vote does not solve this because one, it's demonstrable that he's got far greater valuable capital. Do you want him selling a $5 AMC share or a 67-cent ape share? I think that's just speaks for itself right there. And then there's sort of some other mechanics into why a yes vote actually has less dilution. None of these votes personally hold up. And the fact that I'm seeing sort of bots and sock puppets all over the place, all reading from the same script, just tips me off that what they want to do is frame your thinking and get you thinking about quantity. They want you thinking about dilution. And you're so focused, it's that horse's blinders where I don't see the hay bale to my right and I don't see the open field to my left. I'm just thinking, dilution. And you're not maybe thinking about, actually, there's less dilution with a yes vote, right? So see, I shape your thinking into this yucky, shady, slippery ice cream shop, when actually, no, there's some really good things in there. And so what I just ask you to do, whether with me, whether with anybody else, think about the opposite side of an argument think about sort of external parameters, I'll call it, to that argument. They're getting you focused on this one little piece to put blinders on you so you don't think about the other pieces. Okay, here's another way to kind of look at that. Here are, in my opinion, the top 5 things, kind of do an old school David Letterman. Here's the top 5 things that beat the short thesis, and whether a no vote or a yes vote kind of more aligns with them. Retail hodling. So actually, I don't think a no vote or a yes vote impacts that. I think apes are hodling. I know I'm hodling, whether I get my way on this vote or not, whether you get your way on this vote or not. I didn't stay here for 2 years to walk away if the vote doesn't go how I think it should go, right? I'm here. So just hear me on that clearly. If you don't vote with me, and that's also what probably helps separate, kind of the shills from the apes. If someone's out there saying, well, I'm getting my way on the vote or I'm out of here, you know what? Fine. Sell your shares and I'll buy them. Because I'm here regardless, and I'm here for the apes, whether it goes the way I want it to go or not, because we have something we're trying to affect change on here, and we want free and fair markets, and we believe AMC is where we told the shorts no more. So whether or not someone's going to hodl, I don't think the vote impacts that one bit. So, I don't know. There you go. Cost to borrow. So here I want to be thoughtful. You could kind of argue both ways. On the one hand, you could argue lower price stocks could carry more volatility. And so therefore, maybe that's part of why the cost to borrow is high. Look at that Tigers and Frogs video of mine if you want to know why I actually believe the reason the cost to borrow spiked is more closely related to FTX and tokens and some other things like that. But if you want to make the argument that cost to borrow is high because of the low price of AMC and APE, you could kind of make that argument, although AMC's been lower than this with a much lower cost to borrow. But I'm just openly admitting to you, kind of in humility, okay, there's at least some case to be made. Maybe I'd go digging in some academic articles to really think that through. I think you could also make the argument that because a yes vote means Adam has far greater access to capital, that would create risk for shorts, and therefore if I'm a loaning institution, I'm going to ask for a higher percent. But in this case, because I think you can argue it both ways, I'm going to say really neither vote impacts the cost to borrow. And so that's my point of view. But let's look at these next 3. So a healthy balance sheet. Healthy balance sheet means, maybe debt is paid down, or there's a lot of formulas, like you might hear something called the quick ratio. You might look at assets to liabilities, debt to income. There's quite a few other things. So like return on equity, return on invested capital. If your balance sheet starts looking healthier, whether that's through paying down debt or because revenues are better or your assets are sort of generating more cash, that is a real problem for the shorts. The healthier a company, the stronger they are. And what's more, a company with a healthy balance sheet has far more favorable lending. So think about AMC being able to refinance again, which, by the way, they've been able to do several times already. And another reason I'm not so concerned about debt. As long as they are looking healthy enough, they have access to refinancing. So, what happens if they get even healthier and they get more favorable loan rates, so the percent of interest? Well, that starts saving you money. That actually makes you more profitable. And so the thing is, I've made the case time and again, sourced it, backed it up, proved it, that a yes vote gives them much stronger access to capital, which they can use to make a much healthier balance sheet. So in this case, a yes vote actually helps beat the shorts, in my opinion. Okay, access to capital. Boy, I've talked that one into the ground as well. So I'll just jump forward that it's, in my opinion, demonstrably provable that Adam has more access to capital, that it's less dilutive with a yes vote. So if you want to beat the shorts, and by the way, this is why, the reason I'm covering this, go back to that framing. You're being framed to think about things that I think Shorty wants you to think about. But what's the real goal we have here? We believe shorts have been cheating against us. We want to stop the shorts. What will stop the shorts? These things. Which vote aligns with that best? That's how I'm going to vote. So in this case, if my company is stronger and has a healthier balance sheet, if my company has better access to capital that is less dilutive, that is painful for the shorts. Because what is access to capital ultimately? It's time. It's time. So think about, shorts have cost to borrow. They have something called opportunity cost, You could find me on Reddit kind of a long time ago. I don't know, maybe this post is close to 2 years ago, at least a year and a half or something. And I think I call it like the four levers working against Shorty. Um, in that's a long write up, but I basically cover uh, why time is on the side of the longs and time is actually working against Shorty. And if AMC has access to capital, that means they're not going bankrupt. It means they have plenty of time, and it means shorts have to sit on their position and wait. That's a problem for shorts. That's not a problem for me. I can just hodl. So that's why a yes vote, because they have access to more capital and it's less dilutive capital, aligns with beating the shorts. Finally, profits, right? Profits is ultimately the number one way that AMC will kind of destroy the short thesis. And in my opinion, because now I've given this like a only little bit leaning to the yes side, but because of that greater access to capital, if you reduce your interest payments, if you merge with, maybe you create a new profitable revenue line, like the investment in popcorn, that takes investment, or maybe you buy new theater locations or merge with somebody else that's different from you entirely, like a studio or something. Those things would help generate more profits and therefore beat the shorts. But I'm trying to be sort of objective here and say, in my opinion on this one, the yes vote is not as strongly correlated because the most correlated thing is the industry turning around, right? And is Adam and the team making good use of our properties and diversifying revenue and all that. But certainly using this capital to create new revenue streams would add to profits. So that's why I believe kind of leans a little bit to the yes side. Finally, here's something that I just think is really, really critical. Whether you agree with me on this vote, whether you disagree with me on this vote, ultimately, we are being pushed on sentiment all the time. They want us speaking in negative terms. And so you will get people who jump on your threads and come at you. And, I had someone on YouTube call me dumb and say I was using like high school math. And I sat here going, okay, first off, I can go through my resume. And if I did, and if I, said, well, I scored this on that test and this on that test and did this in grad school and did this at a Dow Jones company, and it would get me super braggy and I'd sound kind of off, and there'd be some apes who would be turned off by that. But I could prove the point. I could prove I'm not dumb. I could prove that I'm using something a lot more advanced than high school math. And frankly, also what a dumb argument. Like, awesome if someone was good at high school math. Great. I'm glad they are. But there'll be times like, and look at Gasparino, right? Or just various other people who Cohodes it's his whole MO. He's going to say super negative things that have no grounding in reality. They aren't true about you at all. But the whole thing is, it's framing again. If I can frame you speaking in negative terms, arguing about negative things, getting annoyed, getting frustrated, now I've got this power over your emotions. I'm shaping the entire social discussion. Think out there are investment bots that invest based on social sentiment. So there are actually, movement to stock sometimes that's related to, oh, people are really talking positively about this stock or that stock. There's advanced analytics on this stuff. There was someone who even wanted me to kind of help sell a platform that was based on social sentiment. People are out there working on this stuff. The way that you talk to each other, the way that you talk about your company, even in life, guys, the way that you impact people around you. Just look at this quote from Bob Marley. Like, someone, I admire him because he really focused on a positive message, and he believed that maybe you could change the world through positivity. He just said, the greatness of a man is not how much wealth he acquires, but in his integrity and his ability to affect those around him positively. Say the same about, a woman as well, however you want to word this. But the great thing about people isn't whether we acquire wealth. It's how do we change and shift the world around us. And do you want to shift the world around you yelling and screaming and fighting and talking about negative things and you're such an idiot and your argument is terrible and what a dummy? What do you really accomplish? Even if you win an argument, so you've convinced someone else they're stupid, I don't think that's really kind of bettering the world around us. Now, don't get me wrong. From time to time, even I enjoy, let's say, shredding. If I sense someone is genuinely a bad player, and I want to tear apart their argument. Yeah, even I enjoy that sometimes. But in general, I try to come back to remembering I would love to leave this world a better place than when I was born in it. And to me, that means lifting other people up. That means encouraging others, educating others. And I don't really want to waste my time raging against someone because what, some stranger on the internet called me dumb and they don't even know who I am and they don't know the first thing about me, or they called me negative and they didn't even take the time to understand who I am, or they said you're just kind of engaging in clickbait and they don't have a clue the things I do in my life, the things I do in my community, the things I do in this online community. It's okay to ignore people who are being negative. I say focus on positivity. Focus on being on your own message and your own mission and getting something positive out there. That's framing. You want to frame the conversation. You grab the power and you say, I'm not engaging on your terms. Your terms are negative. I'm going to engage on my terms. I'm going to speak about the things I love. I'm going to speak about the people I love. I'm going to speak about the ways that we're going to win. I'm going to lift others up. I'm going to educate people. And boy, you watch. You will just leave all of those sock puppets and bots and shills behind because they can't stay up with you when you're out there shining light. Let's go.